Why freedom? This is an audio essay on common law versus rule by experts. I don't speak for the truckers or anyone else, and I'm not here to bring you my own ideas. I'm here to explain the very basic ideas that underlie Western society and how they are in direct contrast to Marxism. Western society was founded on the idea of Christian love, which is the common law. I see freedom signs and I want to articulate what freedom means in the context of the West. It means something very simple and very specific, and it's been said to be written in the hearts of all men. I wish that conservative philosophers would say what I'm about to say, but we're short of them. They're few and far between. It's fine to say that you want freedom. It's another to be able to articulate an argument that shows why you not only should have freedom, but must have it. I also have a clear and simple argument against Marxism. It's important to be for something rather than just against something in principle. Objections without an alternative are a waste of time. People see our signs and they do not often understand why we do this. It hasn't been clearly explained to them. There is no leader to tell us what to think. The truth is self-evident, and we don't need any experts. This is a straightforward application of reason, common sense, to be given to our detractors, the very few that are smart enough to learn both sides of a debate or conflict before participating. What I have to say will not be complex because it'll snap right in line with your natural reasoning, so you don't need any experts for interpretation. It's why everyone in the world has always wanted to live in the West, and why we believed ourselves to be blessed to live in such a great society and superior to those who are living under older and more tyrannical, purely statutory or arbitrary forms of law. It's been widely believed that people from other places would vote in tyrannical forms of government in our own country. People really have not been given the education that they should have received in public schools. Schools do not teach what this freedom or common law is or what the West actually stands for. They preach hate and resentment towards Western people and Christians. They don't even teach lawyers what common law is in law schools. I want to explain the perfection of the Western systems of government and law courts. The West has a nearly ideal structure and function in its governments, but they have been corrupted from the inside. I want to restore the West and the laws for which it was founded. For that, communists and psychopaths will label me as an extremist. No system can survive being destroyed from the inside, and the Luciferians and child molesters in our power structures don't want the general population exposed to ideas about laws or freedom. We are both forgetting and losing this common law, that universal law that works towards everlasting peace for all mankind. I've been awake for 20 years. I woke up from seeing the sickness in our society from the inside. I've had 2 Crown representatives in Canada tell me they were above the law. My attempts to hold them accountable only prove them right. I think the system looks for and promotes sick people. I think law is important to sane people, and I think the system is attacking our sanity. I've always thought that it was law and not opposing thumbs that made us different from the monkeys. If we lose the concept of law, we become no different than they are. We have been slowly drawn in through the gates of hell, starting with the income tax over 100 years ago. Everyone knows it's unlawful, but they go along anyway. We let the devil in and wonder why the devil does what devils do. Some people are so blinded by hate and revenge that they will burn their own house down. We have all seen this cultural Marxism direct attack on reason and logic in almost all of its forms. It's divided people, created hate, and more importantly, created a mass allergy to common sense and reason. Common law systems rely on common sense and reason. They rely on a sane population. The most valuable asset that people have is their sanity, and it's being destroyed. And a lot of people are giving it up for a nice house and granite countertops and, a $60,000 SUV. What is the good? In the following, I'm going to give you the empirical answer to this question, and later I'm going to give you a rational one. The ancient Greek book, The Republic of Plato, asks, "What is the good?" This is the essential question that defines the book. In the first chapter, Socrates goes around to various members of the community to ask the question, What is justice? The strong man says might is right. The rich man says pay your debts. Other answers are that justice is to help your friends and harm your enemies, and to receive one's due. Socrates asks, why be good? An answer comes back quickly, and that amounts to the answer so that other people will like you. Socrates then asks, why be good if you could be invisible and never get caught? You could get away with anything. No one had an answer. The book doesn't have an answer. Living a life of injustice seems to have the advantage in the Republic of Plato, if you have the means and the ability to do so. So Plato's Republic is like a manual for some and a warning for others. Another famous philosopher, Aristotle, a generation or so later, from Plato's Academy, defined justice as living according to one's nature. It is self-evident that it is human nature for people to be peaceful and cooperative. We don't have big teeth or claws, but we do have big hands and big brains. People come back from wars not only with physical but with mental injuries as well. War is not really in our nature, but it's a means of control for our controllers. War is fought for money. It creates fear and justifies more government protection. As we move into the New World Order under one government, we have other boogeymen such as viruses and that deadly carbon dioxide, for which more protection and more control over the population will be required to keep everyone safe. So how did society start? Rousseau was an Enlightenment philosopher who explains this. The strong look after and manage the weak in groups and built the first society. How else could it happen? Weak people from the forest came to people with castles for that protection and agreed to work in return for the comfort and safety of the castle or construction. Rousseau asks, how else could it happen? People get safety and comfort through numbers and cooperation, and the king gets money and power. King wants a strong economic output and a happy population, or else the population just starts throwing rocks at him and will not be his soldiers. People had the physical force. Political power comes from the barrel of a gun. We have counterfeit money and big armies to keep people borrowing it. We cannot overthrow a king by throwing rocks at him. So what does this oligarchy want? Our real government is the banks, and this can be proven by the fact that our money is just fiat, it's just paper. No one in power would allow someone else to print money from nothing. When you have power, you must protect that power or else you lose it. If you are king, then you need agents, armies, and oaths to maintain and protect your power. Power must also always expand in places to make up for what it loses in others, so it's always looking for ways to expand. It creates a life force that really exists for its own purpose. Christians call it the devil. What is a constitution? It is the government's contract with its people, or an organization's contract with its members and associates. It's an expression of the common law, but no expression of the common law is perfect. In common law, it is the unwritten writ that is the highest law, not the Constitution. If it was a constitution, we would be subject to unregulated statutory law. Great Reset will require a purely statutory system of laws. Why are they so evil? A scene from the 2005 slasher movie, The Hostel, explains this perfectly, I think. In one scene, the character played by Rick Hoffman, a wealthy client of this torture museum, is torturing a young woman. She cries out to ask why. He explains, "Once you have been everywhere, done everything, and met everyone, what else is there? Once you have your private jets, your $500 million yachts, and all the climate change robbery conferences you can handle, what else is there? You start raping little kids and disempower the general population with climate change and overpopulation mythology to get more power." Our rulers have always said that the earth is overpopulated since the days of Homer, devalues human life in the minds of the population, and can justify war and other things. They have more sheep than they need for their production. They call technology a power multiplier in their think tank papers. And without energy, you will not have access to technology and won't be able to compete. We all put these sick people in power, and now many just sit back and watch them wreck the whole system, because no one really knows what to do about this. Jordan Peterson talks about the necessity of limitations, and these people in power do not have any. If you suddenly came into nearly an infinite amount of money, most of the normal limitations would not exist. You could do anything imaginable. You would view the world in a completely different way than an ordinary mutt. There's also something else. People who seek authority tend to view it as a privilege rather than a responsibility. Good people accept authority positions just so that they don't have to live under authoritarian rule. When not enough good people want the burden of leadership positions, then we get stuck with the money-grubbing authoritarians. The people that are behind this great reset have been a small group of fantastically wealthy families. People like Lenin and Trotsky are no different than the Bill Gates and the George Soros of today. They are all Bolsheviks. They buy propaganda and control education to get people to believe their bullshit. They've been around since the days of Christ, trying to build their Tower of Babel and become gods themselves. Does a rich man really go to hell? Aristotle said that happiness is everything in moderation. You can be too good-looking or too rich. How do you know who your friends are? He said it was best to be slightly above average. Do people like Bill Gates always sleep with one eye open? Do they have any friends? Are they angry at the world? Who knows what really motivates them? So why be good? I need to return to this question. The last answer was empirical. We live just lives to have friends. No one likes thieves and liars. This answer involves you interacting with society and in the material world. The rational answer is that being good gives virtue, and when the good things come in life, you feel like you deserve them. None of this exists in time or space. It is time and space independent. Some people call this spiritual. Kant brought conscience to the answer to this important question. Conscience is money you earn versus money you win or steal, and psychopaths cannot understand the difference between the two. The breaking of common law always breaks down to a form of theft, but some people believe they have special, chosen, God-given right of theft. When you consider rape or murder or anything like that, it always really comes down to a form of theft. Original sin tells us every man is a sinner. No one is pure in their motives. At minimum, we trade to our own advantage and must for the economy to work. No government of man can be trusted. Okay, on the good and governance. I am not of this world, said Christ. Christ gave us a universal definition of evil so that we could live in peace and that there could be peace on earth. Treat others as you would want to be treated is the single commandment. It is universal, not time and space dependent, therefore not of this world. This is a regulative principle rather than a law that must be obeyed. All written laws must satisfy this requirement. You can't legislate theft under a statutory system that is regulated by the common law. But if it's not regulated by the common law, you can legislate anything. Rulers want purely statutory law without the oversight of common law so that they can have unregulated power. They do not want the ruled to have an independent yardstick from which to judge evil. They want to be the controllers of what is good and what is evil. Common law protects the ruled from their rulers through the regulation of statutes. Common law countries are based on the Holy Trinity in internal structure and governance, and this is because of original sin, so that corruption can't really overtake the system. However, no system can survive an attack from the inside. The Catholics worked out the principle of the Trinity. The Father is the lawgiver, the Son is the regulative principle of reason so that laws cannot be applied unfairly, and the Holy Ghost is the spirit of moral consciousness. In a true common law court, the jurors remain supreme and don't take special moral instruction from judges. In government, the legislative branch creates the statutes. The judicial branch determines if the statutes fall within the common law, and the executive branch acts as the conscience and has the responsibility of executing the policies of government so as not to violate this principle of Christian love. In pure common law courts, you have a prosecutor which represents the law, a defense lawyer which is reason or the Son, and a jury who acts as the moral consciousness of the court. Our legal system does not operate this way. Our natural right has been instrumentally removed, and we now have legalists in place of lawyers in our courts. Rulers create statutory law and have since the days of legal, an ancient Chinese philosopher. Another Chinese philosopher, Confucius, was first to express this universal law. Legalists were overthrown by Confucius. China forgot her history during its communist revolution, the Great Leap Forward in the middle of last century. Its past was destroyed by communists. The world is once again governed by unregulated legalism. Now, this unregulated legalism is being brought to us through science. So a great way to justify statutory laws is to say that they are scientific and science requires them. Science is about truth, so scientists never lie. They're like gods and we should trust the experts. Any regular watcher of television will explain this to you. It says so right on talk shows and so forth on mainstream media. Don't think, trust the experts. They repeat it over and over again. What is the illusion of science? A great way to justify statutory law is to say that science requires them. Science is about truth, so scientists never lie. They are like gods and we should all trust the experts. And this idea is repeated over and over again on mainstream television. Don't think, trust the experts. If the law becomes the dictates of science, then there can be no evil intent because science is about truth. Science, as determined by experts who ultimately work for banks, can light the way with their infinite knowledge and understanding. There's been a propaganda campaign to make us believe that the best minds go into science, and to push the best minds into science. Science is truth. Nothing could actually be further from the actual truth. War is fought for money, and war drives technology development. Technology concentrates power. Science is always political when it is in the hands of the rulers. Science is not absolute truth, and it doesn't expect to find an absolute truth. Science has a tertiary relationship to truth. Science is about making our lives easier, first and foremost. Gabriel's horn best shows the illusion of truth in science. Suppose I have a horn with a really long neck. It has a 1 meter diameter at its opening, and it gets narrower according to a ruler that makes a diameter 1/2 a meter at a distance of 1 meter from the opening, a diameter of 1/3 of a meter 2 meters away, and 1/4 of a meter at a distance 3 meters away from the opening, and so on. It just gets narrow and narrower as you move away from the opening along the throat. It just keeps getting narrower and narrower and never ends. It is said to be infinite in length. Suppose you have this horn and you wanted to paint this horn. If you tried to calculate how much paint you would need to cover its surface, you would find that you could never have enough paint. An infinite paint supply would be required. There is no math mistake. So someone comes along and says they can calculate the internal volume of this horn using the same kind of math, and it can be shown to have a finite volume. Therefore, a finite amount of paint would be required to fill it. If the horn was filled with paint and then you poured that paint out, paint would still be covering the surface area. So you would have a finite amount of paint required to paint the entire surface area. So there's a contradiction that shows our cognition of the world does not show how it truly is. Kant said that it would be an incredible coincidence if the world actually existed as we see it. Modern science tells us that everything is vibration and waves and can be explained by an equation known as Schrodinger's equation. The Schrödinger equation isn't a real equation, but it explains physical phenomena. In fact, it is an impossible and absurd statement of reality, and this is obvious to anyone that knows enough about science to apply this math. It's an absurd statement that warps the mind, as any physicist will admit. At the same time, it explains the physical world as we perceive it. So there is a contradiction in cognition. So not only are we dependent on our senses to see how the world is, but also on our cognitions to understand it. And our cognitions cannot possibly discern reality. Now, science really isn't about truth. It's about finding ways of engineering new technology to make money. It has only a tertiary connection to truth. There are hard mathematical sciences like physics and engineering, and there are soft, complex sciences like medicine and economics, where actual practice still requires art and is ultimately subjective. In science, two different theories can lead to the same result. Science can't tell which is the actual truth. The idea that gravity is a gang of invisible leprechauns of all sizes pushing everything downward has never been disproven. Science prefers to look at things in terms of force fields because they are simple and accurate and easily expressed as mathematical equations. Science strives to simplify and to make compact statements. Math is the best language for this. Everything in science starts with perception and is therefore subjective. Kant always said that it was science that was subjective, and only morality and universal law can be truly objective. And the leftists have taken Kant and inverted him in their writings to discredit him as well. And this is really his fundamental hypothesis or idea of all of Kantian philosophy. This is really it in a nutshell, that science is subjective and only morality and universal law can be truly objective. Common law is objective, fair, and simple. Kant called his expression of this law the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative requirement implies universality. The Romans called this law right of self. The Greeks called it the golden rule. The West calls it the unwritten writ, that is the highest writ in the land, and Christianity has it as its single commandment. So it's come to the consciousness of mankind through a lot of different roads. Every Western law judge operates according to this writ in the common law courts when the courts are not captured and free to operate by law. In our world, the courts are instruments of private banks. Governments answer to banks in the same way that a student council answers to a principal in a public school. The common law in its written form is the Bible, both the Old and New Testament. The Old Testament is constitutive law, which is regulated by fairness by the New Testament in written form. Our rulers wish us to believe that morals are purely subjective and that science leads us to an objective truth. It's part of the inversion of logic that goes with totalitarianism. So what is fundamentally wrong with Marxism, or rule by experts? A Marxist economy is a scientific economy run by experts. It promises a grand utopia where all your needs will be automatically met by experts. The view that the world can be better led by experts rather than individual choice and freedom is a key aspect of Marxism. Marxism seeks to abolish private property. In other words, they want to own and control everything. Even if they had the best intentions, Marxism cannot be made for the following two reasons. First, we'll take a look at the empirical reason why Marxism cannot work, then look at the rational reason. The empirical expert view is that an economy can be centrally managed. This view empowers experts and gives rulers justifiable means of control. The reality is that it cannot be managed by experts, and for mathematical reasons. Central management of an economy requires tracking and adjusting many variables having to do with consumption and production. The math that deals with this is called systems theory, and it's been around for over 100 years. Little progress has been made in that 100 years, and mathematicians still have problems with simple systems involving only a few variables. Automatic pilots and electronic controls of airplanes is a good example of applied systems theory, but they only involve a few variables as well as some art. In an economy, you have thousands of variables and thousands of means of production, and they all must equate with when these equations are solved. So this is why you get breadlines and starvation in Marxist economies. Even computers can't make this work. The problem is far bigger than problems typically solved by computers. And we don't really understand the math. So we end up throwing shit up against a wall and gradually seeing what sticks when solving these equations by computer. It cannot work, and the people selling it know it cannot work. Marxist ideas do not have to work. Censorship protects them from critical analysis. The second reason why Marxism cannot work is a rational one. The West, its institutions, and its laws have been founded entirely on the principle of universal right, the common law or Christian love. This is a purely rational principle. Marxism does not have a universal definition of evil. Even if a Marxist economy could work, it could never be fair because it has no conception of what fairness is. Being fair is very important to our natural consciousness and mental health. Being fair is more important than comfort for most people. Most people aren't thieves and liars. To be unconscious of fairness is to be a robot or a psychopath. Marxists tend to be hypocrites. In fact, they must be, because they censor. No censor believes that his or her own writing should be censored. Christ said the hottest places in hell were reserved for hypocrites. Marxism has nothing to say about rights and obligations under the law. Things like murder, theft, etc. need to be part of a system of laws. Their philosophy of Noahide law is the subject of right and has one set of laws for Jews and another for non-Jews. This hypocrisy violates the universal law of Christianity, so they persecute Christians and have for all of history, starting with Christ. 100 million Christians murdered and often tortured during the last century, and you didn't hear about it in history class. But you learned all about the Holocaust. Good idea is to look up the Bolshevik Revolution or the Chinese Great Leap Forward. They killed hundreds of millions of Christians in the sickest and cruelest possible way. A good question to ask about any war is, who's printing and lending the money to pay for this war? So what went wrong? Wealth accumulation, people fell asleep, and governments and corporations became too powerful, and they encroached on our natural right for more profit. People became softened with comfort, while an oligarchy slowly increased its control by allowing corporations to have control over the government and in turn the population. The income tax has been a perfect example of this. These tax collectors and beneficiaries of this tax are not government organizations. They're only made to look that way. Public education, the media has warped and twisted minds so badly that almost everything people believe is a complete and total distortion that doesn't bear any resemblance to reality or actual history. The war on racism is a perfect example. Some other examples of these total lies are the history of slavery, the reasons for all the wars, the official version of 9/11, the evil nature of white men who created this terrible common law and supposedly enslaved the black men, and this coronavirus. In historical reality, Christians didn't play a role in black slavery other than to rescue them. Pure materialism has created the new god, the scientists. These myths all work to create a narrative based on hate and revenge. The hate and desire for revenge prevents people from thinking rationally. The left claims to teach critical thought, but in reality preach a different kind of thinking that is the opposite of critical, the worship of authorities. They're always hypocritical like that. They say one thing, but in reality are trying to do another. So why does the media lie all the time? The media establishes a governing narrative. The media is controlled to help bring this communist transformation of society. The extent that the narrative includes truth is the extent that the narrative cannot be controlled. Any connection to actual truth results in a loss of control of the narrative. Reality must be created, like in the pages of a fictional novel, which is under the complete control of its author. The television and mainstream news have no lawful obligation to tell you the truth about anything. The relationship between the viewer and any news organization is based purely on trust and always will be. So what should we do? The first step is to understand the problem. If you do not understand the problem, you cannot fix it. And usually when you struggle to fix a problem and cannot, it's because you really don't understand the problem statement. Once you have a clear understanding of the problem statement, the problem is usually easy to solve. So if you do not like the way things are, you must have a solution as well as a clear understanding of the problem. I know what I think the problem is. I think that our society is run by some kind of suicidal death cult, or various cults that are essentially anti-law and suicidal in nature. People's minds are completely warped. The idiocracy is almost firmly in place. This is part of any Bolshevik revolution. In Russia, the Bolsheviks got the Russians to burn out their farmers, and then they had to eat their children just to survive. Another problem was really made clear during the pandemic. We have a great many highly qualified doctors on our side, but the public will not listen to anyone that does not have a clear and demonstrable conflict of interest. Without that conflict of interest, a doctor has no credibility. I want to say that again. If you are expert, you still do not have credibility without that clear conflict of interest. This is not just mind control, it's complete mind warping. You read comments online and you think, okay, well, that's a 15-year-old boy. Then you look at the profile and you find a 45-year-old with a master's degree. Not only can they be exceptionally stupid, but exceptionally cruel and judgmental as well. You can't force a 40-year-old professional to grow up or to read a book. No one is safe in a communist revolution. There is no possibility of winning through violent uprising or terrorism. You can't stop someone from jumping off a bridge by pointing a gun at them. To win, we must stop the intermediates, the executive, between us and the oligarchy from committing suicide by following orders all the way to their own graves. The barrier to this is the incredible, even jaw-dropping hubris that keeps professionals in line with the agenda. They are the perfect example of applied mind control. The judgments of general populations tend toward cruelty rather than forgiveness. And this has been generally true of all societies, even the West of 100 years ago when people read books and were educated. This fear of cruelty keeps the executors of this policy living in fear. If we are to squeeze out of the sick agenda, then forgiveness would have to be a necessary part of any healing process. Thank you for listening. My name is Doug Plum, and I also write about this in my free online ebook called Assholes and Bullshit, A Language Problem, and you can find that just with a Google search. Thanks for listening once again.